Right, so today we're going to look at two devices used for measuring lung volume and lung flow. The first of which we're going to look at is a peak flow meter. Okay, you may have seen this at your doctor's. So it's quite often used by asthmatics or people with COPD or emphysema to monitor their effectiveness of the lung. It's a very simple device that you blow into and air comes out the other end. Okay, and there's a little disc, a little float in here, and depending upon how much air your lungs are pushing out, okay, depends on how far the disc is pushed up the tube, and you get a reading from the little arrow. You get a reading from the little arrow on the side of the tube. Okay, the higher up, or the higher the reading, the more air, the more flow of air you are pushing out. Okay, so it's measuring the maximum rate at which you are able to expel air from your lungs. Now, to do this, you need to take a really deep breath and blow as hard and with as much force as you can into the device. Okay, and as you can see, I have just done that, and I have a reading of 610, okay, as my peak flow. Now, if I didn't have such a capacity in my lungs, I would only be able to blow a much lower reading. Okay, it's a very simple and very common and cheap device for monitoring how your lungs are working. The next device we're going to look at, okay, is a form of spirometer. Now, the traditional form of a spirometer is actually a tank of water with a wedge that gets drawn down into the water as air is removed or added by you, so that it raises and lowers a float on a tank of water. This is a modern digital version. It has a pressure and flow sensor in here, so it's measuring, okay, how much air is flowing and the rate of that air that is flowing through the device. Okay, it's a one-way device. Okay, so you can only blow in from one end. It's filtered. Okay, and then there is an output end. For this device to work, you must also make sure that your nose is clamped, because you want all of your air to be coming in and out through your mouth. Now, we're going to look at the different types of breathing that is associated with this. And so this data logger screen, okay, is going to show the rate of flow in litres per second through the device. So we have a central axis which is 0, and then we have positive and negative. Positive being out, negative being in. Okay, so we're going to set that off, and we're going to look at three types of breathing. Normal, shallow, normal shallow breathing, like resting breathing. We're going to look at breathing of someone who is breathing heavily, taking big, deep breaths. And we're going to look at the breathing of someone who is hyperventilating, taking short, rapid breaths. Okay, and we're going to see the difference on the graph as to what happens to the rate of air and the overall volume of air. So as you can see, in normal resting breathing, okay, you see very little disturbance north and south of the central axis. If we now were to simulate having done exercise and taking deep, deep breaths to completely fill our lungs, you could see that suddenly we are now going much higher and having much broader peaks. Okay? The area in this square, okay, the area in the peak itself is the volume. Okay, so the greater the area in this peak is, the greater the volume of air moving in and out of your lungs. Now we're going to look at someone hyperventilated taking very shallow, rapid, short breaths. You can only do this for a few seconds, otherwise it will start to affect you. Now, as you can see here, okay, we're still getting a displacement north and south, but there is actually little volume. Okay, there is little volume exchange and little time occurring for that air that's in the lungs to exchange across the surfaces in the lung. Okay, so we have normal after exercise or heavier breathing, and someone who is taking very rapid breaths. Now, it may be that they don't go quite as high as that when they're doing rapid breathing. You may see, but it kind of goes a bit beyond the sensitivity of the device, hence why it's slightly amplified.